All right, I guess we can get started. It's just about 6, so we'll try to keep this to about an hour. Unless people have lots and lots of questions, we can try to keep answering them. I've talked with most of you, probably via email. I'm Annie McLean with NVDA. Thank you for coming. It's nice to see people in person. I know it's a yucky night, so I appreciate everybody being here. And looking forward to a really good discussion. Hopefully we can have some great conversations about different ideas for ARPA money, and you can hear from each other about different projects that you guys are planning. I think maybe we'll do a quick round of introductions since it's a small group, and I don't think I know everybody, and I'm sure you all don't know each other. Some of you may. Like I said, I'll start. I'm Annie McLean with NVDA. Just start maybe with Todd and work our way around the room.
I'm Todd Vinatulli. I'm president of the Burke Chamber and also the village trustee for West Burke.
I'm Roberta Gillett. I'm from Waterford, just a citizens committee for collecting ideas for the ARPA money for our town.
I'm Lena Smith. I'm the town clerk treasurer in Walden.
And I'm Robin Cook. I'm chairing the ARPA committee in Walden. Ann Wallace, Select Board, Wheelock.
Dave Snedeker, Director of NVDA. I work with him.
Christine Emmons, Select Board in West Burke, or Burke.
Joe Allen, Select Board member of Town Burke.
Amanda Grochi, Assistant Town Clerk of Kirby.
Doug Connolly, village trustee in Lindenville.
Chad Whitehead, Town Manager, St. Jay.
Wanda Grant, town clerk, Kirby.
Mike Harris, Town Administrator for the Town of Falls.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to introduce Katie Buckley. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here in person tonight. She's the ARPA. She knows everything ARPA, and she's with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And I'll let her give a brief introduction, and then I think we'll have her do a quick overview, presentation of some of the ARPA basics, and then we'll kind of move into a question and answer portion, or just an informal discussion, whatever seems to work. So go ahead, Katie.
All right, thanks, Annie. Appreciate it. All right, thanks, Annie. Appreciate it. I really wish I could have been there in person tonight. I have a very sick dog, so I couldn't leave her. And so I was grateful to have the option for Zoom. And it's still not the same as being in the room. Conversations are so much better in person. So thank you for having me. As Annie said, I'm Katie Buckley. I'm the director of the ARPA Assistance and Coordination Program with Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I've been working very closely with RPCs throughout the state in all of this ARPA work, and extremely closely with NVDA with Dave and Annie. And so I'm glad to be here. So I have a slide deck with some ARPA basics, and I'm going to whip right through my slides so it will give plenty of time for question and answer afterward. And my slide deck can be made available to you. I'll send a copy of it to Annie, and if she could distribute it or post it, whatever, I'm happy to make that available. So I'm going to try and share. I need permission to share my screen, Annie, if that's okay. Great. Okay, thanks. Just jump right in here. So what we'll cover in this slide deck is Vermont's share of ARPA funding, the timeline for the funding, eligible and ineligible uses, a quick review, overview of reporting, some ideas of what towns are thinking about here in Vermont that I was able to pick up in the headlines, and both nationally, the role of Vermont League of Cities and Towns in your RPC, and then we'll have time for a question and answer. So Vermont's share, Vermont is getting $1.25 billion of ARPA funding. A little over $1 billion is running through the state of Vermont. So about a little less than half of that was allocated during the last legislative session. So about 600 million remains to be allocated in the 2022 legislative session. So there's more to come from them. Counties were due to receive $121 million, but since we don't really have a county form of government here in Vermont, thanks to our congressional delegation, the governor, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and others that encouraged Treasury to change their thinking and have that money go to municipalities throughout Vermont. We were successful in that effort, and so that $121 million is rolling out to municipalities instead. We have 2 metro cities in the state of Vermont. They're Burlington and South Burlington, and they got their money directly from Treasury. Everybody else Every other municipality is considered a non-entitlement unit of government, and NEU, you might hear that term tossed around, and that's what that means. The NEU money flowed through the state of Vermont. It's not that the state has any oversight on the money. They were just simply a financial intermediary. So the timeline, all municipalities have about half of their money thus far. So if they were allocated, easy number here, $100,000, they already have 50,000 of it cash in the bank sitting there waiting of their local and their county money. The remainder of that will arrive around the same time next year, same equal amount. All funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. All funds must be expended by December 31st, 2026. And any funds not obligated by that date must be returned to Treasury, and any funds not spent by December 31st, 2026 must be returned to the Treasury. So what can you spend the money on? There are 7 categories in Treasury's guidance, and they are here on this slide. They break down into 66 subcategories for communities struggling with those 7 categories. What exactly do they mean? This table, which is Appendix 1 of Treasury's reporting and compliance guide that goes along with the funding. It's in the back of there, and it's a good way of looking at spending ideas and seeing if they fit into this table. If they don't, odds are you can't use your money on it. What can you not, definitely and clearly not spend your money on? Your ARPA funding is a federal grant award, therefore it can't be used as federal match, non-federal match to another federal award. So if you're doing a larger scale project in your community, and you have a couple of different grants in it, or you have some grant funding in the project, look at your grant agreement or your program guidance for that grant and see what they will and won't allow as match, and that will help you determine if your ARPA money can be used as grant match or not. Pension funds, you can't use it for pension funds, you can't use it for infrastructure not directly addressed in ARPA, for rainy day funds, financial reserves, or to pay down outstanding debt. For reporting, all municipalities will be required to do all of their reporting directly to Treasury. Treasury has created an online portal through which all reporting will be done. More to come on that in the months to follow. All municipalities other than Burlington will be on an annual reporting schedule. Those reports will be due April 30th of each year, starting in this coming April 2022 through 2027 will be the last report. And any questions about reporting, guidance, any of Treasury's documents, it's all on an ARPA webpage that we've established on our website. It's filled with frequently asked questions, links to documents, resources. There's a lot of information on there, maybe too much. Here are some ideas on what communities throughout the state are contemplating for spending their money on. You'll notice that there is a lot of water, sewer, wastewater scattered throughout. It's a pretty big topic, hard to find funding for, so this is a unique opportunity to fund some of those maintenance and repair that needs to be done on the local level. But those are just some things that other towns throughout the state are thinking about. The National League of Cities has a tracker. So if you're interested in finding out what other larger scale communities throughout the country are doing, you can go to this website and take a look at that database there to think about and get your wheels turning and get ideas. While not all of them are relatable to Vermont because the scale is much bigger, there's quite a bit in there to think about, and there's some good ideas. Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I do ARPA all day, every day. That's my only job. That's what I do. So we provide guidance, eligibility analysis, webinars, come to meetings just like this, meeting with town officials, and ARPA committees throughout the state. We interpret Treasury's guidance. All of this is the American Rescue Plan Act passed in March. It's implemented by the interim final rule. We're waiting on a final rule. It's not here yet. So tracking all of the updates to this particular very unique piece of funding and making sure that municipalities have the latest and greatest information and resources available to them. again, I work closely with the RPCs, which is why I'm sitting with you all tonight, hosting with NVDA, hosting this meeting. So great partners. The RPCs are the boots on the ground that are really the half of the whole of this whole ARPA and assistance and coordination program. And that's my slide deck. Pretty quick. So my contact information, if you need to contact me for any reason, is on the very last slide there. So if my deck is shared, you'll have access to that information. It's a QR code if you want to just put me as a contact in your phone, your smartphone. If you ever have a burning ARPA question, feel free. I'm going to stop sharing at this point and go back into the room if that's okay.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Maybe just start with about the presentation or any general questions, and then we can move into specifics. None. Hearing none. Okay. We can either go around the room, or do we just want to jump in? If anyone has questions about specific projects, let's dig in.
Something came up, we had our first ARPA committee meeting last night in Walden.
Katie, can you hear?
I can't hear super clearly, I'm sorry.
Would you be able to just come up and speak a little closer to that? Thank you.
Sure. We had our first committee meeting, ARPA committee meeting in Walden last night. And something came up, I think I know the answer to it, but I raise it because it may come up in other towns too. Walden, much like other very small towns, doesn't have a town hall, and we often use our church basements for secular community events, dinners and festivals and things like that. I know you can't use federal dollars for religious purposes, but I wondered if there's a clause somewhere where we could use ARPA funds for secular activity, for reimbursement for losses of secular activity that the churches were unable to hold in the last couple of years.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to need to work on that one.
Okay.
I'm sorry that the very first question is one that I don't have, but it's a really good question.
Yeah,
and
it's splitting hairs.
there's nothing specific in the regs on that, and so I would just want to dig a little bit more deeply on that.
Yeah. The other
It's
thing,
in Walden, right?
yes. The other thing that came up that we had questions about, and this would probably fall into the premium pay category, and that is when we were talking about the impact that the virus has had on schools and continue to have on a regular basis. That's their biggest problem right now, is being able to get substitutes for teachers who are sent home with positive test results. And I think there's something like one substitute for 3 schools or something. I mean, it's a very low resource for Walden School. And we're almost always unable to get a substitute. So we were wondering if we could use ARPA funds to pay a premium on the stipend that is paid to substitutes, or pay maybe a bonus amount for a commitment for a substitute to prioritize the needs of Walden School.
Yes, since educators, childcare workers were, they're included in the definition of eligible worker for premium pay. You could do that. There's some caps on the amount that you can pay. So you just want to make sure that you're doing it within the caps. And it sounds like you probably would be, but they would be eligible under premium pay.
Okay, and for like a long-term commitment, not specifically associated with hours that they put in. Could we, what about the idea of offering a person a bonus for like a yearly commitment to prioritize?
If it's a one-time payment, that's actually, yeah, it's pretty clean. If you were to increase their wage, then you would be left, once the ARPA funds are exhausted, having to maintain that wage. So it gets a little bit more challenging. So, but a incentive, premium pay incentive in that way is, you can do that. There are lots of different ways to do it, and towns are considering different ways of doing it throughout the state. But yes, they're eligible based on the definition in the interim final rule.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Christina, I wasn't picking on you, but I know you had 2 really good questions.
Yeah, so I had emailed in a couple of questions yesterday about with the use of money for stormwater and clean water. If we were working on replacing a sand and salt shed that has a stormwater improvement component and potentially clean water. It is that, obviously, infrastructure itself is not eligible, but because this ties into that, would that be eligible at all?
Is it to bring you in compliant, and I might lean on to Annie and Dave to help me with this answer, is the work to bring you in compliance with your municipal roads general permit? Or is it completely unrelated to that?
Does the township or the sand and salt shed fall into the general permit?
I don't
think it falls
so.
into the general.
It's only roads, right? I'm sorry. I haven't been as much involved with the since that came into being the municipal roads general permit, so I don't know the regs on that as well.
So it is to bring us in compliance with stormwater regulations.
Yeah, I think you could. It's probably eligible.
And
I might check with the state on it to ensure.
I'm just not sure who to check with. What, like Department of Environmental Conservation?
Yeah.
Would that be who you would check with? So
Yeah.
the thing that makes me think it's eligible is because there was some wording in there. If it's eligible for current grant programs, then it would be an eligible use. And salt sheds are eligible under municipal mitigation and transportation alternatives for that stormwater improvement piece.
So I'm looking at your email right now, and I didn't respond to you knowing that we would talk about it tonight. I hope that's okay. So I think what I'm going to do is take that. I have a contact at DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, and I'll bounce it off that person, and I will let you know.
And for
I think it probably is, but I would want confirmation on that before really committing to it 100%.
yeah, I think it was kind of gray area, so we were looking for that interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question that was on that email was about the hydrologically connected segments that aren't in compliance with the municipal roads general permit. Could those be, could we use the funding to bring those into compliance because that has that stormwater?
And it's my understanding that yes, you can. If it's to bring you into compliance with your permit, then yes.
So Katie, just to clarify, anything under the municipal general roads permit to do with stormwater compliance is it's a pretty broad, because they're going to be.
It is a pretty broad. I'm sorry, go ahead, Annie.
I just wanted to clarify for everyone that's generally something that is an eligible activity.
Mm-hmm.
You've been getting a lot of questions about that.
I have too. And I have I won't say who told me, but a pretty high authority said, yes, if it's generally speaking, if it's to bring you in compliance with the permit, then it's an eligible use of ARPA.
To follow up on Christine's first question too, and forgive me if I'm misinterpreting, but when we talked, you're talking about purchasing a property purchase to relocate the salt shed, but it would also include other facilities? Can you speak to that a little bit? I think I know the answer. It's basically, you would only be using the ARPA funds for maybe the portion of the property purchase that was gonna house the salt shed. So I guess the example, it's gonna be a salt shed and maybe another town facility of some sort.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, I think that we weren't necessarily, well, it would be nice if it would help pay for the land. I don't think we were really thinking that that was gonna be really definable, but if the shed itself were eligible, that would be pretty helpful. But, I mean, it would be nice to know whether or not
Yeah.
the land was eligible as well.
Did you get that?
I didn't get the end of it, I'm sorry.
So if they're purchasing a new property to relocate the salt shed,
Yep.
part A would be, would the property purchase be eligible? Part B would be if it was going to be used for multiple activities other than just the salt shed, would a portion of the property purchase be eligible?
Yeah, you might want to assign a square footage or what's the footprint of it and assign a value to it. I know that's a little bit complicated, but to justify it,
But for the first part, would if it was just the salt shed property, would that property purchase be an eligible activity, the purchase itself?
I don't know. I'd need to ask that one.
So I do know we were talking about also the wastewater system. And like who we've been dealing with the state, Lynette?
Yes, Lynette and then Andrea as well.
And yeah, they had told us that the portion of that land that would potentially be used for a wastewater system. So if we bought 10 acres. So for example, if 3 acres was gonna house a wastewater system, that ARPA funds were eligible for that land purchase for that specific wastewater system. So that was how they guided us there.
Did you get that one?
I didn't get the question.
It's still a land purchase question, but
Is
specifically
it part of a wastewater project?
Yeah.
So acquiring land for a wastewater project, let me just make sure I understand that. I would imagine that the land acquisition is part of the project cost and therefore it would be eligible.
That's what we were advised.
And I think, I don't know, Annie or Dave, how well you know the EPA's eligibility handbook in terms of what's in and what's out for project category, if land acquisition is included in that eligibility in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund eligibility guide.
Dave, do you know?
No, we would have to look into that one.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Dave said.
We would have to look into that one, Kate.
Okay, yeah, that would be my only, my gut is saying yes, but I'd want to confirm that in that eligibility handbook to make sure that a land acquisition, to me, it feels like it's part of the project cost. And it would just be part of the project cost, not just the system itself, but the land acquisition and all the development of the land and ultimately the construction of the system. It's just an expense to the project. But I'd want to confirm that.
Dave?
Katie, to Christine's questions, assuming that both the salt shed for stormwater and also the connected road segments are eligible for funding, are you still advising that they should look to the Agency of Natural Resource pots of money first before committing town funds?
Yes, if there's funding, so the Agency of Natural Resources has 5 priority areas that they're using their ARPA funding on. And I don't know if any of these fall into that. I know this, I'd have to look at the sessions that they're offering. They've had some webinars on them. One of the priority areas is stormwater, but it might be helping folks through the 3-acre stormwater rule.
I think it is.
Yeah, so it might be more specific than able to help this particular situation. But worth asking, worth asking them to see if there's funding. What's the worst you'll get told? No? I always ask.
Dave, is that something you can follow up on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I can help you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm ready.
Floor is yours.
Hi.
In Waterford, we're just beginning to collect ideas, and one idea that has come up frequently is having sort of a revolving grant for small businesses rather than just a one-time grant, a loan. And so,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, just wondering, first of all, if that would be eligible, and I guess we get tied up in nuts trying to decide if that would count as we would have expended the money that we decide to put into that by 2026, if it's still there getting used, and sort of what sort of instrument we would have to come up with that. But also combined with that, if you could just kind of speak to the use of evidence requirement for helping small businesses or targeted populations in need in the community.
You mean collecting the data for it?
And what they're requiring, and yeah.
They actually just, the compliance and reporting document that I keep referencing, it's like the guidebook for all this funding. They just updated it on November 5th. And in that update, they said, don't worry about data right now, more to come on that. So the toughest part of this whole thing is that things are changing along the way. So it's like 3 steps forward, 4 steps back sometimes. So understanding how to navigate the road ahead in the near future is just a little bit tricky because the things are changing. So for loans are a little bit hard because of they need to be paid back within the time frame of before the close of ARPA. And so for the folks in the room, Annie, do you have contact information for everybody?
I believe is everyone on the email list? No? Okay, anyone who was not on my original email list, if you want to jot your email down, I will have it.
It would be great if I can, for the questions that I need to chase back answers for, if there's a way to capture those, and then circulate answers back to the group. Like I actually have a good guidance piece on the revolving loan question. It's actually addressed pretty thoroughly in Treasury's frequently asked questions. And I'd be happy to just clip that section and drop it in so you can read for yourself the ins and outs of it. It's a little bit hairy, to be honest with you, if you want to do a revolving loan fund.
So Katie, just so I'm clear, the questions that you need to take a look into or we need to look into together, we're gonna just send the answers back to everybody?
You can do that. If you want to just do a distribution for everybody in the room, we can just do a email with.
Okay. Sounds good.
If that's okay.
So does the lack or forthcoming requirements for data for nonprofits, is that still to be determined, or?
Can you just say the beginning of that part again?
For nonprofits, the evidence that they're requiring to.
So part of the guidance that came out on the 5th was, I'd say, aside from relaxing the data that needs to be collected at this point, the most substantive change was breaking out, actually more clearly defining beneficiary and subrecipient, which they hadn't done before. Everybody was essentially a subrecipient, which made them have to comply with all the same rules and regs as the towns themselves receiving the funds. And so beneficiary, you don't have to do all that reporting. It's a completely different dynamic than if you're a subrecipient. If you are, so a beneficiary are just those who are receiving, their end users of the funds. And for a subrecipient, it's the town basically giving money to a nonprofit to perform services on behalf of the town through a contractual agreement. So services that the town would like to provide. Let's say I wanted to run a grant program for providing direct assistance for homeowners who can't make their mortgage payments. I'm just kind of making a situation up. And there's an organization in town who could do all the administrative work for that. So the town didn't have to do it. They could subgrant the money over to that organization. The organization does all of the service on behalf of the town, since the town doesn't have the internal resources to do it themselves. That would make that organization a subrecipient, since they are carrying out services on behalf of the town under contract. If you were just straight out giving money to an organization to help them help your residents for non-specific, not under contract, they're just a organization that does good for your community, then they're a beneficiary. And so the reporting is different. The reporting on that organization is different. So that's pretty substantive. So we're waiting to find out more about what sort of data collection would need to be present for a beneficiary versus a subrecipient. I'm going to guess that it's going to be very different. So more to come on that.
Anything else? Questions?
Sorry, can you hear me? This one is like mud to me. I just can't get it straight in my head. So if they are a benefit, if we decide like, oh, there's all these small businesses in town that have suffered so much, and we're gonna have a grant to them if they need, then we get to decide what they have to show us that they suffered. I mean, or are there guidelines from Treasury that will, no, okay, so it's.
Every town is different in the level of documentation that you'd ask for.
Okay.
It's all in how you want to approach the problem. So for example, if there are small businesses that need assistance, you might ask them, have you already gone to the state and sought assistance through these programs that have been existing for small businesses? So the state has ARPA funding that they've been using to help small businesses. If have either used those programs, the funding through them wasn't enough, or they weren't eligible, you could provide, backstop them with your local funding if you wanted to do that. There's lots of different ways to approach it. And every town is different. Some towns are like, we don't care, we're just going to give it to them. Where others are like, I want to make sure that there's no double dipping. So there's a wide range, and it really depends upon your community and how your community wants to handle it.
I do have another question. Sorry. I read somewhere we could put the money in an interest-bearing account and keep the interest.
Yeah.
Do we have to report that, or is there any sort of accounting?
And you don't have to use the ARPA on the interest on an ARPA eligible expense. It just goes into your general fund.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess you're not gonna make a ton of interest because rates aren't that great. But if you even wanted to do a short-term investment, as long as you don't put the principal at risk, you can do that as well. So a CD or some really safe instrument, you could do that. But yes, you get to keep the interest and you don't have to report out on that.
Questions from anyone else? Ann?
I just find this really overwhelming, and I kind of feel like just calling Annie or Dave or Katie isn't enough. Not that you're not very knowledgeable and helpful. So are towns beginning to hire someone? I mean, Wheelock, we're a very small town. We don't have a lot of administrative capacity. Are towns beginning to hire someone to help them out of this, more as to, get to know the town and what the needs are, and then come up with ideas that would hit the mark?
Are you asking, just to clarify,
Are towns beginning to do that? Mm-hmm. Or, I don't want to be the first town. I don't want to, I have to work. Our select board has to make all these decisions. And frankly, it's pretty overwhelming.
Are you asking if towns are hiring someone to help like facilitate and seek community input and make sense of it? Or are you asking if towns are hiring someone to sort of answer the ARPA, like be their ARPA expert?
Well, I guess it could be, it could be both.
Okay.
I don't know if Annie and Dave want to answer for the NK what you're hearing, if that's happening.
I mean, I know that there's a couple towns that have been looking at assistance for community engagement. So either hiring someone or working with an organization that helps with community facilitation to sort of help them engage their community. I know St. J and Linden, I think. I don't know if the village is included or not, are forming ARPA committees of residents in town, and I don't know exactly how those are going to work. Doug or Chad, if you had any insight on that. I know.
I don't. The concept is very new, but I know they're organizational now, but it's to encompass a pretty broad range of the community.
In our first committee meeting we had just the other day, what came out of that is we do need assistance facilitating. So making sure that our committee is going to, what I'm hearing is gather input, make sure that there's as much inclusion as possible. And so we are exploring bringing on a facilitator to help host meetings and get out into the communities. Of course, we're larger, so we got to try to get into the different villages and really make sure that we get feedback from the public. We have also, I know that administration is an eligible expense, and even though we have an administrative staff, we still are maxed out on capacity. So we have considered whether we take on bring on somebody using ARPA funds to help administrate.
Thanks, Chad. And Kate, do you have anything to add to that from elsewhere in the state, what you've seen?
I think that towns are beginning to think about exactly what you're thinking about, Anne, which it is daunting. And, to go back to what Annie was just saying, and the folks in the room around an ARPA committee, is really taking that deep breath to say, okay, what do we want to do? And gathering that information and figuring out what your priorities are. And if some of your priorities are big fish, you're going to want to hire someone to help shepherd you through if they're big fish projects and you have the funding and the need to do them, you're probably going to want to hire somebody to help shepherd you through that. But you might find through your prioritization process that what's important to your community are a few bite-sized pieces that actually aren't that hard to carry out. It might be, we really want to help the teachers in the school and both attract and retain substitutes. And you know what? That's going to cost $50,000. Here's $50,000 to the school. We have the child care center down the street. They've been at it. They need more, workers. We're going to give them some money too. You might decide that you have 3 or 4 really important initiatives in your town or priorities in your town that you decide we're just going to transfer funding to these and we're done. You might have a $20 million wastewater project. You could have anything in between, but once you get that prioritization piece done, which is the community engagement part, and the select board starts to decide what's most important to get done for the community now and for a long-term investment in its future, that will start to tell you, we're going to need more help along the way. And you might bring somebody on board to do that, but you might not, depending upon what the priorities are. And there are consultants throughout the state who could be retained to do the work. I don't want to throw the RPC out there, but they're fantastic project managers and organizers. Whether or not they have the bandwidth, I don't know, but I let them speak to that. That's their bucket. But there are folks who do that work, and I think you'll see more and more of that springing up as the need arises. So I don't know if that did a great job of answering your question, but time will tell.
I don't, and then let me just jump in. I kind of heard two parts, if I'm hearing it right. There's the community outreach and community buy-in piece, which we just kind of talked about with facilitation. The other part that maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but the help on deciding what's eligible, like that's daunting to me. Like, and there's no cut or dry. It's those list of categories. There's a group of RPCs have been sharing together what each of the communities are doing and some examples of how communities are potentially going to categorize. Sorry, my glasses are fogging up. Projects, and I'm happy to share that information if people have specific questions about projects or hey, we want to do this. Where how can we make it fit? And I can sort of gather some of that information and share it. It's not. There's nobody that can rubber stamp it and say, yep, that's okay, and you're not gonna get into any hot water.
But it is helpful to hear what other communities are looking at spending their money on.
Yeah. So yeah, we can start sharing some of that out. If you have specific projects, let me know. And I can try to dig around and see if anyone else has that same or has used certain categories to kind of categorize that. Hey Katie, people have been using that sheet. I've kind of been out of the loop on ARPA this week.
I've been so vi for personal reasons. My apologies. But, with so many projects, I'll give an example of one I was responding to right before I jumped on this Zoom webinar. An example is the town asked me the question, is restoring our records an eligible use of ARPA? I said, no, it's not. But if you're restoring the record so that you can digitize the record, then it is. Right, so it's for almost every town that I've been talking to, if they send me an email with is this eligible? I have to ask 2 or 3 questions back to say, tell me more about what it is you're doing. And when you dig a little deeper, like that particular example, I am restoring so that I can digitize, then yes, it is. But you have to ask the question. So it's not so simple. And honestly, even those of us who have been doing this sort of work for a really long time, this is all new and different. It's unlike any funding that has ever come. I mean, Dave and Annie, I'm sure you can chime in on this. It's a lot of interpreting it as we go and taking it on its face. When it all first rolled out, there was a lot more no than yes. And as we're watching and learning how people are interpreting the guidelines, it's becoming broader in terms of how projects can fit into it. So, paving your roads, you're not going to do that with ARPA funding. But if you had lost revenue, you could use that money to pave your roads. Or if you're doing a water line project, you can pave that section of road there. So there's a lot more interpretation into the regs. And honestly, that's what we're here for. So don't be shy in asking. I get lists all day, every day. Like the last one was 12. Here's our whole list. Can you just run through that? And based on what you know, and as much as I can, I try and assign expenditure categories to them so that at least the town has that in terms of when the time comes for reporting, if it's one they're going to select, that they have the expenditure category, they know how to basically write it up in terms of a project narrative for reporting. So it gets you a little bit of the way there, but.
I had a question on premium pay. For if we were thinking about doing lump sum one-time bonuses, premium pay for the municipal employees, it was sounding like the road crews, and we have a rubbish and recycle crew might be eligible because they were working through pandemic in with hazard kind of conditions, but administrative type employees wouldn't necessarily be eligible. Does that sound right?
So I think I heard you say sanitation workers were in there.
Yep.
They are eligible. Your road crew isn't, and neither is your town office staff.
They're not eligible.
Not eligible. So the criteria for premium pay for eligible workers are those people who were frontline, face-to-face, risking exposure. So your teachers were face-to-face, your sanitation workers were touching other people's stuff. Grocery store clerks, frontline, police officers, firefighters, those folks whose jobs cannot be done remotely, and they are face-to-face with the public every day as part of their work.
Do firefighters count if they're volunteer?
Are they paid?
No.
There's no stipend or no.
Thank you.
What about, just to clarify, like a municipal, like a clerk or a lister or someone that was, if the office was open? So they're not they're choosing to be open to face-to-face contact?
Yeah.
They're still not?
Mhm.
Okay.
I had a question from a lister about lister mileage, because they have driving separate cars to go out and visit all the properties.
It's true. Double
I think that would go into your revenue loss.
Revenue loss.
As an unbudgeted expense. So I don't know how many folks have done the revenue loss calculator to determine the amount of revenue loss.
Has everyone seen that and the new one that is NEMRIC based? No, I can send it to you if anyone else has seen it. It went out in a couple of emails from me, but I can resend it. And Katie, am I correct that NEMRIC is happy to answer questions?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're in NEMRIC town and you need help with the calculator, give them a ring and they'll help.
And I've been hearing from a lot of towns that they don't believe they have revenue loss or it's not significant. But what Katie told me was that do the calculation anyway. You never know. It doesn't take that long. You can get NEMRIC to help you, and you might be surprised. And that opens up, if it's your revenue loss amount, you can use that for anything. You don't have to fit it into one of these categories. So I don't want to get anyone too excited about that, but if you really don't think you have any, you might have some.
But the formula does include a 4.1% adjustment for revenue year over year, which I don't know many towns that were planning on a 4.1% revenue bump. So in their budget. So it's worth doing the calculation, even if it doesn't yield results, it just might. And that becomes, as Annie just said, really flexible money.
So are things eligible, can we take into account, like, for example, for road work, the cost of materials doubled, so like the cost of a culvert doubled in price because of COVID, because of availability, trucking issues, so are those types of things that we can account for or take into account?
Near the end of the question, I heard you describing the cost increases.
She's asking if the cost increases are either built into the NEMRIC model or they can account for those in addition.
It's really about your approved budget. Run the formula and you'll see. It tells you 3 points in time where you're going to run the formula. So you pull your reports from NEMRIC, or I'm sorry if you're not a NEMRIC town in the room. I'm most familiar with NEMRIC and most towns use it. You'll run your reports from those 3 points in time, and it'll go through this calculator and it will tell you whether you've had lost revenue or not based on that.
Is anyone not a NEMRIC town? There's the.
Yep, I've been through it.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah. So you can do it, but it's just a little bit less user friendly.
Yeah. Did you use GFOA's calculator?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah, it's a little clunky.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. I know Burke and Westburg have been doing wastewater feasibility studies. So this might be just specific to them, but for the A&R money, for that, they're one of the communities that I do know of that is gotten farther along in that process, where they might be able to access those funds. Can you speak a little bit to that? Or is that just directly to ANR question?
That's an A&R question for sure. Sorry, I wish I could, but I don't know really the finer details of their funding. I know we've been working with them to try and get them to push more information out to folks. And that's why you're seeing those spotlight webinars on each of their 5 priority areas and them really trying to get information out there. So it is a more specific, sorry, Annie, it's a more specific question to them.
So I don't know if it's helpful to other towns, but they did advise us that there's a lot of money for water and wastewater in the state system. So we shouldn't be looking to necessarily expend our town funds on those types of things because there's those other pots of money at the state level that are available. So that was helpful information too.
Yeah, we're encouraging towns to look, if you have larger projects that you're looking to do in your community, look and see if there's other funding available to you as well, because there is a lot of money out there right now. The infrastructure bill just passed. There's the Build Back Better bill that's potentially going to pass. So if all of that shakes out, see where the money is going to land, because you can stack it into your projects, hopefully. Or if you have a project that's not eligible for ARPA, maybe it's eligible through infrastructure money or some of the other money that's coming down the pipe. So that's where we're kind of telling towns, sit back, be patient and wait and see where the other dollars land and see if you can use those dollars to stretch your local dollars.
So I started on that idea of waiting with like with the broadband last mile project. You know, we're all just anxiously waiting for Wi-Fi.
We're gonna do a broadband webinar on December 1st if you're interested.
Okay, I think I already
That has been just to bring a little bit more clarity and understanding around that. So we'll have a representative from the Vermont Community Broadband Board, which is pretty newly formed, and they're the entity through which all of that state broadband money is going to be flowing. So they'll be granting out that money. We are going to have a representative from the Vermont Communication Union District Association, and then we'll have a member of a communication union district, just talking about all of that, where the money is, how it's going to flow, how it all works, and how towns can fit into that if they're not already involved. So hoping to just keep talking about these different priority areas and where there's funding, and seeing where you can plug in if that's your priority in your community. And I would imagine broadband is for a lot of towns.
Is the target audience for that webinar municipalities?
It is, or it's a free webinar, so anybody who wants to participate, feel free. And so I want to say it's up on our website today. Annie, you would have been, and Dave, you would have been getting it in an update email on Tuesday, which towns would as well. But it is there now. We just put it up there this morning and finished drafting it.
It came out today.
Pardon?
It came out today.
It came out today?
Yeah. Your webinar.
It's on the website today?
Yeah.
Yes. Dave's saying it's on the website today, which I think you're saying too. So
Yeah.
saying the same thing.
Yep. So if you wanted to go register, you can register for it today. It's going to happen December 1st
Is this,
at 11 a.m.
excuse me,
Go ahead.
is this webinar that you're talking about going to show the interface between the broadband project funds and the ARPA funds? We've been talking a lot about, you know, broadband, NEK broadband, and a lot about ARPA, and trying to figure out what is covered with funds that are already available for the CUDs, and if there's anything left over that ARPA can fill the holes. Is that what this is going to be about?
That's a component of it. So there's the large bucket of money at the state level that's coming through. I want to say there's another 100 million coming through the infrastructure bill that just passed. So they'll be talking about what those funds are for, how they'll flow, and how local dollars could plug into that. It's kind of the whole shooting match of a conversation. And so if that's a topic you're interested in, come and bring your questions for those folks to answer.
Thank you.
That's great. Looking forward to that.
Same.
I could have a quick thought for your town, Waterford. I think, I attended the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative Zoom meeting on Friday, and there was a broadband panel, and I believe that they said that your town is among the first, and you're actually going to get service in a matter of months.
I know, except if you don't live on one of 3 streets. So that's the last mile part, because it just kills your soul when you see it go past your driveway and you just gaze at it longingly.
Have you talked to your CUD rep for Waterford? I can't think who it is off the top
Bill
of my head.
Piper,
Yeah,
he
Bill.
is,
Yeah, he's great.
He's very aggressively wanting us to put all our money for broadband, so.
I didn't mean about that.
Trying to find a way, to provide for people who won't get, the main flow of broadband, because there are always those single house, way up the street, and there's a limited amount of grants from the state. But we were wondering, I guess just on an administrative viewpoint from ARPA funds, so let's say we wanted to keep some money for grants for citizens for that last mile project, but we can't really say that they will have used those funds by 2026 necessarily. Like, hopefully we're all hooked up by then. But if we give the money to ourselves, is that the expenditure as far as the reporting requirements are written, or is the expenditure when we in turn grant the money to all the community members who needed it?
When you give it to the community members, so you can obligate it for that purpose, but then you would need to have it spent by 2026.
Okay.
So like, if you're, and forgive me, this is not my topic area, so if I butcher some of the appropriate terms, please forgive me. But if your funding drops, is that when it comes from the road to a house? So if you're funding that, you would want to be sure that you're funding it for those disproportionately impacted by COVID. Right, so you're not going to want to fund a drop to a vacation home for executive from New York City. Okay, and so
are they not disproportionately affected though, because they weren't able to participate in things like school during COVID?
I think they could afford to pay for their drop.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they're not a resident and a taxpayer. Like they're a taxpayer, but they're not a voter. It's complicated. I'm just saying you might want to tailor your funding to those most in need.
And so did you say the money is, if they're giving it directly to the recipient, the internet purchaser, is it considered spent once they've given the money to?
Yeah.
So they can hang on to it until the time when they can actually, so does they
I mean, that's a risk in and of itself. You want to ensure that money's spent for the intended purpose.
Right.
So you might, and this is really up to the town and how tight the town is in terms of spending. Like if I were working for a town at the time, I wouldn't give it directly. I would actually pay the vendor directly for the drop on behalf of the resident.
Right, okay.
And then I'm guaranteed that the funding went for the purpose intended.
Okay.
Does anyone?
I got one question. On nonprofit organizations, would a senior meal site count as one of that, like a nonprofit?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Would a senior meal site count as a nonprofit?
Yeah. Is it a 501c3 organization?
Yeah. They're in our community building, for one thing, and
Yeah.
we need some equipment to make things a lot safer in there, because things aren't so good right at the moment, with propane and such. So is that something we could do through ARPA funds?
Just to clarify, yeah, I'm not clear on the, so upgrades to a senior meal site facility?
Yes.
To make it safer for,
For the workers who are there, plus the people who come in to have meals.
did you catch that?
Yeah, and I think it's less about the intended use of the money and it going to the organization itself and providing benefit to your community members in need. So you might, if you make a request to the town, you might want to explain to them what the request is for, and then the town could weigh. I would imagine that every town will come up with a selection criteria and how they're going to decide to fund projects based on their own priorities. You know, it might be tied back to the town plan in a lot of instances. I would imagine towns might use that as a criteria. And so if for your particular organization and your request though, I don't see why it wouldn't be an eligible use. It would be up to the community. And so can I just ask the question of the folks that are here tonight, are you municipal officials or are you community members? What role do you play?
I think everybody here is the municipal official.
Okay, okay. So your question wasn't, you're not asking as a nonprofit, representing a nonprofit, you're a municipal official asking about a nonprofit.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Mhm.
Did you have something to add, Tom?
The thing I was thinking as far as broadband and your drops, if you've got a road, say in Waterford, that's 2 miles long and there's 4 people on it, and it's not going to be served, your cost is roughly, I believe that's what we've been looking at, about 40,000 a mile. So the drop is from when it goes from the road to the house. You would have to subsidize that whole 2-mile road at 40,000 a mile.
Right,
And then the people who are there could access that money.
right. There's the drop and there's the last mile or the end mile or whatever.
Right.
So there's the two separate
Exactly.
final.
Because they're not going to put that down that road because
It's
the
only-
cost of
right.
running
Yeah,
for 3 houses down that road.
yeah, right.
Well, it is a little after 7. Does anyone have, Dave?
Just to the idea of business grants, which I think he wanted to be loans, there are other federal programs that the town can apply to, like the Northern Border Regional Commission or USDA Rural Development.
The what?
Allow you to establish a revolving loan fund.
Oh, really? What was the first one you said?
Northern Border Regional Commission
Okay.
and then USDA Rural Development. But NVDA also has a revolving loan fund that's available to any business in the Northeast Kingdom. So if a business has an immediate need, they can apply to us for funding as well.
Okay.
And I want to say, Dave, you might have just said that, I'm sorry, I couldn't totally hear. The state of Vermont has some small business assistance grants as well, correct?
Yes, they do, and as do we now. We just got some funding from USDA to help businesses with recovery.
So I was kind of understanding that there were a lot of other programs out there available to the businesses in our town. And are you kind of reinforcing that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that might not be the best
Right.
use of the town, the amounts that went to the town.
And I think it also saves you from having to go through that prioritization process of how you give the money out.
Absolutely.
There's a lot available to businesses. There's also a lot available to homeowners and renters in terms of rental assistance. There's a program that's going to be coming out, it's just waiting for approval, which is a homeowners assistance program. It can help folks with mortgage payments, taxes, all of their insurance, I want to say, utilities. So there's that for renters, there's that for homeowners. So there's lots of housing resources available. There's business resources available. So really before committing your local dollars to those uses, you should do some exploration around what's existing. And we're working on an internal document of putting together some of the resources for those programs that if you have community members coming in and struggling, you can share it with them and say, look, maybe you want to contact one of these sources for help with your utilities or help with your mortgage payment, or so that you can at least direct them to resources if you're not considering using your local money. And if the resources are there elsewhere, you might not use your local money for that. You might save it for another priority.
And if you have a question about something, or if you're looking for programs to point someone towards, feel free to reach out to myself, Dave, or Katie,
Okay.
and we can try to pinpoint or point you towards some of those resources.
Cool, thank you.
So I did want to say it's just after 7. I know we try to keep it an hour. I'm happy to stay and answer questions if people have more. I'd also like to just thank everyone for coming out. And I wanted to know, I'll probably send out a follow-up email, but if you found this helpful and if you want to do it again, maybe do a remote, or do an ongoing check-in, think about that, and I'll probably send out a little survey. But it's nice for me to hear what everybody's doing, and I hope it's nice for all of you to hear from your neighboring towns and have a chance to kind of discuss this. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.